I came up to the sanctuary to pray today. Trip is having a rough day today, so we kind of backed off the homeschool a little bit this morning, and there's some pretty serious, intense things going on in our family back home. And so I just came up today to pray and was sitting in the quiet, in the darkness here in the sanctuary talking to God. And some things came to my mind that I wanted to share. Um, Throughout my life, some moments in the process um, when I was, I don't know, I must have been 16, almost 17 or 17, either almost 17 or 17, after I had gotten out of juvie. At some point, I had to get a job to help to pay for the court fees that I had costed my family. Um, and uh, Around that time, I decided that maybe it was time for some change. And so um, that was my first job. I first started on weekends, I think, if I remember correctly. It was during the school year, and I started bussing tables at a breakfast place during the weekends to help pay for these court costs, and uh, decided that I was gonna change my life a little bit. And so I started putting forth some really serious effort and got signed up for a firefighting academy. And at some point, I think it was before I joined that fire academy, got a second job that I was working throughout the week, and then had that weekend job at the breakfast place for a time. And um, yeah, whatever. It was all happening really at the same time. And the fire academy, I don't remember if I think it was the second year of that. We had a competition. It was a state competition where all of these academies come together and they have a fire uh, competition. There's a written test portion, and then there's a physical portion. And me and my buddy won first and second place in that. And in that process, that was I, I I'd done some things in my life up to that point, um, but that was the first real big uh, accomplishment like that that I had really had, at least in that way. And um, I worked really hard with my buddy in training to get to that point. And it showed me a few things. There was a lot that I learned through that whole experience, getting arrested and going to juvie, and then getting jobs and getting that opportunity with the firefighting academy. And uh, then after that, some time passed and a lot of things happened, and I ended up in the Marine Corps. And I had tried, all these different things to deal with my pain and my problems. And that's kind of what I hoped the firefighting academy was going to do for me, that it was going to help me to change. And it didn't. It definitely gave me some experience. It gave me some perspective. It gave me some good things, but it did not solve these issues, these internal issues. And so I hoped that the Marine Corps was going to do that for me. I hoped, part of me was hoping that it was going to change me, and the other part was hoping that I was going to be able to just, if it didn't, I had a backup plan. I could just go out in a blaze of glory and um, not have to kill myself, and I could just die that way. So, of course, I went um, into machine gunnery. And so through boot camp, um, I really gave it my all. Oh my goodness, I went above and beyond and really exerted all of my being in hopes that this was going to change me, that I wasn't going to continue in the same cycles and patterns that I had had And so through boot camp, I was right next to the best of the best. I got promoted coming out of boot camp. I was a squad leader all throughout boot camp. I really gave it my best effort and was one of the best in um, the group of men that I was with because I pushed myself beyond my limits. And uh, by the end of that, I knew at that point I was in a lot of trouble because if the Marines couldn't resolve these problems for me, I was like, man, what else is there? And so I went into machine gunnery at the School of Infantry and again gave it my all. I was the best of the best and um, graduated the top of my class there. And uh, still, things were just getting worse. It wasn't helping. In many ways, it was actually making things a lot worse. And so, um, uh, yeah. So throughout all those processes, it was the same basic process. It did not break these cycles and patterns in my life and give me internal resolve, but it was the basic pattern. The basic pattern of growth is always the same. And so while it offered me growth, and I did grow through those experiences, um, it wasn't the type of growth and change and transformation that I needed um, to break these cycles of trauma and chaos in my life. But it did strengthen my character. It did strengthen um, me and who I was, and taught me values and morals. And it wasn't a bad thing. Both all of those things really offered a lot to me, but it wasn't the true transformation that I needed in order to have freedom from the darkness and the depth of the things that I had been through. And so um, I fell apart and went through a lot of really terrible things that brought me to my bottom, where I surrendered my life to God, or began surrendering my life to God. And um, so there came a time in our life, goodness, facing getting sober and being a father was one of the most challenging. Goodness, there's nothing that I did in my life that compares in any way, shape, or form to the mountain of difficulty that was getting sober, facing my trauma, what actually happened to me that I'd been running from all my life, and becoming the father that I needed to be. That was I would have gone through, in boot camp. I had pneumonia in the end, and went through the crucible with pneumonia. And the crucible is 50 some hours of being tested on everything that you had learned up to that point. And as a leader, um, I was a squad leader. As a leader, you have more on your shoulders going through the crucible. And I had pneumonia through this pretty bad. It was pretty bad at that point. But I decided up to that point, dude, there's nothing left for me. I was all in at that point. I'm like, if this doesn't change me, I'm going to die anyway. So I might as well die here. And so I'm like, dude, if I die of pneumonia, I died of pneumonia. I'm not giving it up. I'm getting through this. And so I gave it everything that I had. And it really, wow, man, you think you know what you're capable of or what you're not capable of. And then you have an experience like that, and you learn that really, with the right attitude and perspective, you can truly endure anything. The mind is a very powerful uh, thing. And so, um, looking at getting sober and going through that and dealing with what I'd been through as a kid, like I'd go through the crucible 100 times over with pneumonia and a broken leg before uh, beginning that process. was awful. Oh my goodness. Getting sober for the first time for real, all throughout my life, I'd only really been able to pull together a week, just white knuckling it, hanging on as tight as I could and just giving it everything I got. I could really only do a week sober, if that, uh, throughout pretty much all my life. There's very few times where I got more than that, and it was only because I traded the addiction for something else. And um, uh, Yeah, getting sober for real, giving it up for real, having, I guess, having the opportunity. The Marine Corps blessed me with the opportunity to get real serious treatment. I'd sought opportunities. My family got me opportunities for counseling every now and again as a kid, and it wasn't as thorough as what I needed. And so, um, I finally had a real serious opportunity to get the healing that I needed, and I knew that it could work, and that was really scary. That was, um, a lot of dudes would much rather go to war and die a glorious death than face the trauma of their childhoods, and I understand that. It's getting sober and facing all that was unbelievable, and so. Um, Once I started getting through that and God was giving me freedom, true transformation, and breaking these cycles and patterns that I'd been a slave to all my life, I kind of, that power, that victory, that freedom, that experience is really like nothing else I'd ever experienced before. That was my greatest fear. My greatest fear all my life was what I had hidden in the depths of my heart. And facing those things um, was like nothing I had ever experienced. And though the process was the same as the basic processes I had been through before in my life, it was thorough and transformational in every aspect of my life. And it really gave me true freedom. Jesus really gave me true freedom from my cycles and patterns and addictions and darkness. And so that kind of, it didn't stop there. God kept taking me deeper and deeper and deeper. I was terrified of horses or really anything that was bigger than me because when I was a kid, my stepfather was very physically abusive. He was really big, and when I was really small, he would just kind of treat me like a rag doll and just whoop on me. And um, so I developed a fear of anything that was more powerful than me. I felt like I had to be more powerful than it. And if I wasn't, I needed to just stay away from it because he didn't show me mercy when I was a little boy. He would, uh, I struggled with claustrophobia when he would beat me up. He would get me on the ground and he would manhandle me and keep me suppressed and literally sit on my chest or put his knee on my chest and I couldn't breathe and I was completely, totally and utterly powerless and helpless. He could have killed me. And I decided as I was growing up, I was never going to let that happen again. And that's some of the reason that I got so extreme and working out and going in the Marine Corps and stuff, I wanted to be able to take care of myself and make sure that nobody was going to be able to overpower me like that because I didn't want to ever be put in a situation where I didn't have control ever again. And obviously that's not healthy, at least in that way. Um, so what was I talking about? Yeah, so horses were really scary to me. I didn't really understand them, and they definitely could crush me. And because I couldn't overpower them and understand them, I preferred to keep my distance. And I was terrified of deep water because specifically of sharks, but whatever's down there that can reach up and you're powerless. You're out of your element. You're not going to be able to fight back. You will be powerless, more or less. And so that was all very scary to me. For whatever reason, I was terrified of spiders. I was terrified of bees, terrified of women, and uh, um, I heard some talking. Uh, I kind of just got on a journey of breaking these fears after overcoming, in the name of Jesus Christ, addictions and my fear of my stepfather and the control that he had over my mind. Um, there was many things that God was breaking and giving me power over, giving me a spirit of courage instead of letting this fear control me. And it was amazing. And so we went down into Mexico and we were having some amazing experiences. And we had a property, a homestead that was about probably a little over a mile outside of town. And at first, we were just using a wheelbarrow to get. Sometimes we'd use a taxi or one of our friends to take us back there, but a lot of the time, to save money or to whatever else, if we had to do it, we would use our wheelbarrow to get supplies and whatnot back to our property from town. And um, I decided at one point, you know what? Yeah, I think I didn't really want a car. I didn't want anything that um, other than the basics of what the government could take away from me with all the things that I saw coming. And I wanted to live a more basic lifestyle. I didn't want to be like everybody else. I didn't want so much luxury, and I wanted to be pushed, and I wanted to be transformed, and I wanted to continue to grow and be put in environments that were going to encourage me into the best version of myself. And I felt like having a horse for transportation, at least the majority of the time, was going to be more beneficial to us in that situation for a number of reasons, as well as the fact that I was terrified of them. So I bought a horse. And of course, this horse was a quarter mile, uh, whatever you call it. And so what that means is that this breed is faster, short distance than many other breeds. And I didn't. I did a lot of things too quickly, as I have all my life, and I didn't have the money to get a saddle or much else at that point. And so I was learning to ride this horse bareback in the mountains of rural Mexico, and that was amazing. That was one of the most transformational experiences I've ever had. While the cartel is warring with the police down the road, and they're back right behind our property. The feds and the cartel were back there all the time. There's helicopters and stuff going all over the place in the woods back there. Just feeling the power of this horse underneath me as I'm bareback. As a kid, I always saw these cowboys and these Indians and these people of old going the distance and doing the deal with nothing, with very little, and it just made a different kind of person. And so in my mind, I was thinking, I don't need all this stuff. Let's do it raw. Let's do it as it is, um, and it'll change me, and it did. It did. And so just feeling the power of this beautiful, amazing animal underneath me, surging up the side of a cliff or going up the trail bareback with this environment around me, and taking this beautiful animal into town to get resources. Uh, It was amazing. It was an amazing experience overcoming that fear. First, goodness, that was a journey. That was such a journey. Learning the animal, learning everything about him and who he was as an individual, and developing that relationship with him, and that gripping fear. I mean, we all have those things, like with me with spiders previously. It was just irrational fear. It was not a rational fear, and it was so intense that it would just grip me, and you lose control. It will control you. And in that moment where there's this animal that could just crush you in a moment, and that is extremely intelligent and can sense your fear and can recognize your body language and wants to have authority over you. It was a very beautiful and transformational experience, especially as I'm trying to get on this horse right off the bat without a saddle. Um, and he knows that I don't know what I'm doing, and he can tell. And he was very respectful while also pushing the boundaries. And he would, he was too tall for me to just hop up on, especially with my inexperience with no saddle. And so I would have to walk him over to this log, and we'd have to play around for a little bit because he would kind of step away for a little, give it a step over so I couldn't reach it, and I'd have to keep moving him back and try to have patience with him. Um, and finally, he would start recognizing that I meant business and I wasn't going to give it up, and I would try different methods and techniques. And then he would start kind of bucking me off. I'd start trying to get on, and I wouldn't quite be on, and he'd start moving away from the log just as I'm starting to get on. And so I'd be off center, off balance, and he'd give me a little, not a huge kickoff, but just enough to throw me off, and I'd slam on the ground. And it was a journey, and it was scary, man. And maybe for some people that wouldn't have been such a big deal, especially if they had more knowledge than I did. But for me, coming from the places that I'd been in my life, it was terrifying, especially once I started getting on him. And this one day, and he had, I'd been trying to get to ride him, get to the point of riding him, not just because I needed to learn and we had things we needed to do with our life. He was not just a companion, but he was also a method of transportation and getting gear back to our property. And so finally, when I got him, he was ready to go, man. He'd been wanting to get out and ride, and I was still trying to learn how to ride. So he was getting antsy. And this one day, I wasn't really paying attention. I was focused on a few things at once. I don't remember what happened. Something had happened, and I wasn't really paying attention. And he started. I didn't even have a whatever you call them. I didn't have the reins or whatever. And at that point, and so I had just been using his hair and still had no saddle, just a blanket on his back. And we were starting to go down the path, and I lost focus for a minute, and he started taking off at a dead sprint. And before I could turn his head, and once they get going, you're not going to stop them. Once they're going, man, you're not going to be able to stop them. At least in a narrow way like that. So we had a path, and it had woods on the side and this short drop off and field on this side. And so if I had room, all you got to do is turn them. You turn them into themselves. And if I had room, I could have turned them. But this is just a narrow path, and it's a winding path that goes through these fields alongside this mountain towards town. And he took off at a dead sprint, and the only thing I could have done at that point is jumped off. And so he took off, and I'm like, "Whoa, Samson, whoa!" And I'm trying to stop him, and in the blink of an eye, I'm like, "Okay, here's my options. What am I gonna do?" And it was dangerous because this road is winding, and if there's a vehicle, because workers would come back along these fields at times. If there's a truck coming around that corner, we're going to smash into this thing. And not only is my horse, he would be busted, man. He would die. Even if not immediately, we would have to put him down. But I'm going to get jacked up, man. We're going full speed. And so there came this point of recognition. I'm like, okay, I'm committed now. He's going to run this out. And if we crash, we crash. And if not, you know, I'll live another day. And I just gave it to God. In that moment, I just surrendered all my heart. And uh, it was the same when we were in New Mexico and the tarantulas were breeding, and we were driving along the road. And I said, you know what, today I'm going to get over my fear. And unfortunately, I think it was, yeah, my old Facebook. I think for some reason Facebook doesn't let us get on the videos on there anymore, but we had the video of it where I was breaking that fear with that tarantula. oh my gosh, I was shaking. I was terrified in the video. I'm just being a weirdo. I was just, I was really, that was just an irrational, serious fear that I had. And so I picked up a wild tarantula and I held it for a minute. And ever since, I mean, that broke my fear. It broke, goodness, I was terrified of small spiders. This huge tarantula. Oh man, that was wild. That the adrenaline and the power and the experience of overcoming these fears and breaking them, getting them out of your heart and out of your life and not allowing them to control you anymore is so necessary and worth it. And uh I don't remember what came to my mind why I shared that when I was talking about Samson. Like I was overcoming those fears and just that moment of breakthrough where it's so bad and you feel like you're going to die, that moment of surrender and just giving it up and saying, you know what, this fear is not going to control me anymore. This cycle in my life, this subconscious and conscious fear that drives my life, it no longer has any power here. I'm not going to let this push me and bully me into the way it wants me to go. I am going to have victory here. I'm going to take charge of my life in the name of Jesus Christ. And so then we ended up getting a boat, and I faced one of my greatest fears of deep water. And it wasn't just myself, I had my family. My family was on this boat. So not only if I mess up, and I didn't even know what I was doing. I was learning as we were going. If I mess up, not only am I going to die, but so is my family. And that was terrifying. That was unbelievable, man. But we had already been there before. We had already been to those moments of facing fear and having breakthrough. And God was always faithful, and it was always worth it. And so we came to that point. There was this point on that horse where I wished I never would have bought a horse as we were flying down this path, and I just wished that I was back in Ohio on a couch watching a movie instead of in Mexico in this environment flying down this trail on this runaway horse. I There came this moment of, man, I wish I wouldn't have done this. What am I doing? This is terrible. And with the spider and with the alcoholism and with facing the trauma and with there always comes this point just before the moment of breakthrough where you just wish you wouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't be here. I'm going to die. That comes just before that moment of complete surrender and freedom and breakthrough every single time. And that's what happened on the boat. At first, of course, everything is smooth sailing, perfect weather. There's all these obstacles, as the tides are changing. Um, the water level is going up, sometimes 10, 11 feet, going up and down as the tide is coming in and going out. And so this means that there's some pretty serious water currents and riptides and uh, whirlpools, and there's just craziness going on in some of these areas. And so there was obstacles that I had researched ahead of time, and sometimes you only have a few minutes to get through some of these areas before the tide starts changing and seriously affecting the water conditions. And so uh, goodness, it was smooth sailing for the first few days. It was an 8-day trip, and for the first few days, thank God, it was really smooth, nice weather. Every single obstacle we hit at the perfect timing, not by my doing. Even at my best, at that point in our life, I was just learning, and I could not have timed it all out like that. God did that. It was not of my doing. God blessed that whole experience, and each single obstacle that we were facing, He got us through there at the exact time that we needed to be there. And it was amazing. But that came to an end. As we got towards the end of our journey, we came to this crossing, this opening where you're touching some open ocean called Cape Caution. You come around this cape and you have a lot of open space. And so we come around this Cape Caution and it's called Cape Caution for a reason. And we found out the reason. Not only was there fog as we were deciding whether or not we were going to commit to this crossing right now, whether or not it was necessary, but the water conditions were less than preferable, let's say. And so the seas were steep, and it was very serious. And I determined that it was necessary to commit, and for better or worse, we committed. And there came a point, my goodness gracious, there came a point where I just wanted to be back in Ohio under the covers watching a good movie with a big old pizza and never have ever made any decisions that would have gotten me to that point in my life. And I just wanted to be away. I just wanted it not to be true. I just wanted it all to stop. And we had hours in front of me of this terror. Oh my goodness, I was terrified. I was terrified. I hope someday I can put that into words, because this terror that grips your soul and wants to take control of you, and my family is depending on me. I can't turn back. At this point, with how things are and where we're at in this scenario, we're committed, and I can't turn back. When we got past this point of no return, we just needed to push through. And I prayed my heart out, and we made it through. God was faithful. He preserved us. There was a few very close calls, but God preserved us. And smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. And so I was learning a lot. And it was that same moment of breakthrough. And I definitely don't want to go on those kind of waves and seas again. But that fear of deep water doesn't affect me like it used to, especially when I started uh, uh, spearfishing and going into really deep water. And uh, yeah, orcas are in this area, and they can be dangerous. And there's also salmon sharks that are basically like a cousin of the great white. And I don't even think there's been any attacks from any of those in these areas. But with that irrational fear, whoa, dude, I don't want to be attacked by any of that stuff. And even if there's this, weird stuff happens all the time, okay? And there has been a diver attacked by an orca somewhere in the world. I read about it as I was preparing to do this stuff, because I wanted to know what I was getting myself into. And you know, even if there hadn't been, I was terrified. I was terrified of that darkness, that unknown, and I faced it. And God gave me victory, and we're overcoming fears. We're breaking cycles. And now I am facing the third divorce of my life. I love my wife with all my heart, and I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm scared. I have been through divorce, and it is very painful. I've done it to myself. All these situations, I was not innocent in them playing out the way that they did, and it was very painful. I did the wrong thing a number of times in a number of ways, and have had to face separation from your partner, and it's an awful experience. Not only is it an awful experience that I want to avoid, but I love my wife and I want to spend the rest of my life with her. And life without her is terrible. Um, so not only, yeah, there's so much going on in the situation, and I'm scared. And God has us here under very unique circumstances. I've never been able to withstand the storm that I'm in right now to the extent that I'm doing it in the way that I'm doing it. Oh my goodness. This last month has been that point. This last month, right now, we are starting to get through that point of no return. This last month has challenged me in ways that I really don't know how to describe right now. This last month has been that moment of just wishing I was somewhere else, just wishing I never would have made the decisions that put me right here at this place in my life, just wishing with all my heart that I was in a different experience, in a different place with a different set of circumstances, and I'm not. This is where I'm at. This is where our family is at. This is what's happening, and this is where we are, and I'm letting go. I'm right now, in these last few days especially, reaching this point of surrender and giving it to God and saying, Lord, you've been faithful all my life, regardless of what happens. I know that the same way that you preserved me through the spider experience and preserved me through these experiences with the horse and preserved me through the storms and the waves and preserved me through the alcoholism and preserved me through the trauma and PTSD, you'll preserve me now. And so it's in your hands, Lord. I let it go to you, and may your will be done. And we're breaking cycles because previously, not just in the last year, but at certain points in my life, dealing with certain triggers and certain difficulties, things went differently for me. And right now, I'm still, to the best of my ability, giving every little bit that I have to my boys. I don't have the things I've had in the past to distract me and to help me get through these things. All I have right now is God. I have very little else to help me. And I've tried to limit myself in that way so that I can really get deeper into the heart when we have all these different people and all this different stuff and all this different music and movies and all these different things. It's not like I haven't been leaning into some of this stuff to some extent, and to some extent it's good. But we're going much deeper than we've ever been before, and God is breaking cycles, and I am experiencing and will continue to experience the freedom that Jesus died for me to have. And the only way to do that is to face that fear and get to that point of no return where you are just in complete reckless abandon of your old ways, and you're in submission and surrender to God, where if He doesn't come through, it's over for you. If He doesn't come through, if He doesn't catch you, if He doesn't prove Himself faithful as He always has, you're going to be crushed. And I am being crushed, but I believe the Bible, and God has been faithful all of my days, and I don't believe that He's brought me or my family here just to drop us and leave us, as He promises He never will. So I felt led to share that testimony today because we are going through it, and Tripp is about to get baptized. He is being confirmed by a brother in the Lord that has reached out and walked alongside us. And unless God provides someone else, I am going to baptize my son in the name of Jesus Christ as he's giving his life to God. And I pray in the name of Jesus Christ that in his example, his brother's heart is stirred as Wyatt is going through a difficult time. He's asking questions. He's developing into a young man, and he's got his own set of circumstances and difficulties and fears and obstacles that he has to face. And he's trying to face them, and we're trying to walk with him through those as a family. And I'm praying that as Tripp makes this decision and leads the way, as Tripp always has, as he's gifted with leadership, that it will stir his brother's heart, and that Wyatt will be next. But that is his decision. I love you guys, and please pray for us.